for the others. The chopper, assigned to the USS Abraham Lincoln, crashed while conducting routine operations about 70 miles off the coast. People in Louisiana and Mississippi are desperate for help.
They need more gas, more power, more food, more help, and a whole lot less water. People in the area are also desperate for gas. Many were lined up at stations throughout New Orleans. If there was even a rumor a station might get gas, then people flocked there. In Metairie, the line of some stations were a mile long.
Fox says Caroline Shively. America's listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
An Afghan translator left behind in Afghanistan is pleading with President Biden to help him and his family leave the country.
An Afghan interpreter named Muhammad, who does not want his last name used for safety reasons, along with his wife and 4 children, are among countless Afghan allies who were left behind when U.S. forces pulled out of Kabul. Now Muhammad is hiding from the Taliban, and through the Wall Street Journal is asking President Biden to save him. Quoting here, "Hello, Mr. President, save me and my family. Don't forget me here." Muhammad isn't asking the president for a favor. He's asking him to return a favor. Back in 2008, Muhammad helped rescue then Senators Joe Biden, John Kerry, and Chuck Hagel after their Black Hawk helicopter was forced to land in a snowstorm in a remote Afghanistan valley.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. Google is once again postponing a return to the office for most workers as COVID cases surge, this time until January 10th. Workers will be required to be vaccinated once offices are fully reopened. And a Louisiana man is still missing after being attacked by an alligator in Hurricane Ida floodwaters.
The wife of a 71-year-old man in Slidell walked outside to see her husband being attacked by a large alligator on the floodwaters in front of their home. She tells sheriff's deputies she ran out, pulled him out of the water, and went to get help. When she returned, he was nowhere to be found and is still missing. The mayor of Slidell, Greg Cromer, mentioned it during an interview on the Fox News channel.
An alligator did grab an individual that was in the water doing something on his property where he was flooded, and he was about knee-deep in the water.
The local sheriff's office is warning people to be on guard for wildlife while walking through floodwaters. John Saucier, Fox News.
And stocks fell slightly Tuesday, but ended the month with gains. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars, like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Contact Express Financial for all your financial needs. Express Financial is consumer lending at its very best. They also have a host of dealer service programs with quick approvals. There are 3 ways to apply. Over the phone at 637-9834. You may visit their office in person at 600 Harmon Loop Road across the street from Costules. Or you can also visit their webpage and apply at myexpressfinancial.com. In most cases, you'll get your money the same day.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not if I got anything to say about it. And I got something to say about it 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, right here on Tall Tales. And you can bet that I'm going to keep saying it. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yeah, we pay a lot of attention to the right of the people here on Tall Tales, which is a constitutional, conservative talk show, a little bit of libertarian from time to time. Call in, audience participation, post on our Facebook page, call the number 888-TALK, and sometimes we'll talk with you. Sometimes I'll do most of the talking myself, and sometimes, depending on what you got to say, we'll just give you a darn good listening to. It all depends. So let's go from here to Zemi Ikotny. And as you know, this is that part of the show where I usually rag on the Pacific Daily News, because even though it has a new owner, Kaleo Moylan, it appears to not have washed all of the Gannett news service out of the bilges in the ship. And they're still causing the ship to list hard to the port side. Here's what they say today. Public schools need to strengthen online education system. Last Friday, Governor Leon Guerrero signed an executive order that closed school campuses because of the recent spike in Wuhan virus infections and hospitalizations. Well, at least that's what she said. With the Red Queen, one never knows. Superintendent John Fernandez wanted the governor to allow students to continue to attend classes in cohorts, dividing students into 2 or 3 groups for face-to-face instruction on alternating days. I got to interrupt here for a second. You know, when I first came here 58 years ago, it was less than a year after Typhoon Karen, which blew away an awful lot of schools on the island, including George Washington High School, which had been located in Mongmong, in what had been the 5th Marine Depot. It is the place where military provisions were gathered for the invasion of Japan. And there were a lot of very large Quonset huts up there, and that was George Washington High School back during the day. Well, those Quonsets blew away, and it took until 1967 to build a new George Washington High School. By the way, I am a plank owner of the new George Washington High School. Plank owner is a sailor or Marine who was aboard a ship when it was commissioned.
Wow. Nice.
And I'm a plank owner of GW. So because the Quonsets had blown away, we were on double session at what then was called Tumon Junior Senior High School. Yeah. Which later on morphed into John F. Kennedy High School. It was a building that was built in 1959. It was not a masterpiece of fine construction. It wasn't 2x4s, tin and chicken wire, but it wasn't far above that. So we split into double sessions. The morning session started like dark 30. And the afternoon session started at like 20 minutes after noon. I'm not going to say 12. And the afternoon session got out about almost 5:30. and the morning session got out in time to clear the building for the afternoon session. So we did that for 3 years. And it wasn't quite the same as a full day, but it was real learning. You know, we had the kids, we had them in class, we had books, we had books and all that sort of thing. And it seemed to work quite well under the circumstances. In 1967, we moved to the building in Manila called George Washington High School. And by that time, the name of Tumon Senior Junior had been changed to JFK Junior Senior, because when I got here in 1963, John Kennedy was still our president. A little bit of history there. I hope that some of the older folks on the air or in the audience will remember all of these things. The really nice thing about the JFK building, Tumon Senior Junior High, was that it had glass window louvers. So if you can imagine a glass window that was about window width, about 3 feet wide, and perhaps 12 or 14 inches in depth, that you could close by turning a crank or open by turning a crank. No screens, open air, etc. Well, because of Typhoon Pamela, all the gears in those little cranks were rusted shut. And what do you do before a typhoon? You close the windows. So, yeah, anyone who would wanted to have started a sauna for teachers would have gone broke in a heartbeat. It was hotter than the hinges of hell in those rooms. But we somehow struggled on through it. Okay, going on with the editorial here. John Fernandez wanted the governor to allow students to continue to attend classes in cohorts, dividing students into 2 or 3 groups for face-to-face instruction on alternating days. This was our preferred option, Fernandez said, but the governor said curbing the spread of Wuhan is an urgent matter, and she didn't want to take half measures. I could add another word after measures.
Right.
Even I am too polite for that. All right. We've seen the schools do a good job of containing and responding to positive cases, but what's out there in the community is much larger and threatening to overwhelm our efforts. He said, John Fernandez. Fernandez said the school system will make its case to reopen schools once Wuhan virus numbers improve. The Guam Department of Education decided not to hold any classes this week so it could prepare faculty and staff for 100% online instruction, which is set to begin Tuesday. Public school educators were teaching face-to-face, will now be teaching online. I'll bet they love this. I'll bet they just love this.
They were cheering.
And of course, this gives rise to a question. Once again, an autobiographical experience. Whatever happened to GFT? Right? Back in the day, the founding days of GFT back in 1965, even before the Guam Federation of Teachers got exclusive recognition, it wouldn't have let something like this go. You know, it was a very militant, aggressive organization. And when things didn't go right, it spoke up.
But you know what? It just seems these days more so, and maybe you can attest to it knowing you have more history, it seems like issues are politicized more along party lines than they are about the actual issues themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The unlike Saul Alinsky, the issue is not. It's never. You know. The issue is never the issue. It's the politics. So if a Democrat does it and it's really wrong, and you're a Democrat, I didn't see anything. Yeah. And vice versa. But I would think that this would be, great recruiting time.
It's ripe for the picking for the GFT.
It certainly is, to take a vigorous stand against this. We urge the school board and the Guam Department of Education to invest more of the $110 million in federal pandemic assistance to strengthen its online education program. The virtual education it provides the students should be just as good as face-to-face instruction. Sorry, Daily News, that's impossible. And in the event future spikes in Wuhan virus numbers occur, or other issues that disrupt in-person education, we need to have a system in place that ensures public school students can be taught at home. I got to go to another autobiographical experience. It's ironic. I think probably in 1967 or 8, I was teaching TESOL at the time, and we got this idea, it was not just here, that we could have instruction by TV. And we could have the teacher at the studio, and he could be doing it, and it would beam to every place where you wanted that kind of instruction, right? And we brought out a guy that wound up working for Payless. I can't remember his name, of course, but he wound up doing Payless's advertising. He was the guru of this program. And they actually got it up and running for a while. A lady named Maud Johnson got the job of teaching TESOL on TV. I applied for it, but I didn't make the cut. That was, I was wondering, gosh, will I ever have a future in the media when I didn't make the cut there? And American Samoa did the same thing. In order to make it work, they had to build a tower on one of the high points on Pongo Pongo Harbor, and they built a ferry across, like a cable car across, and an airplane crashed into it once upon a time. So that never worked, but that TV capability morphed into KGTF. Yeah. I bet nobody at KGF knows that. Yeah. Okay, so my pronouncement here, if you think that virtual instruction is as good as face-to-face in the classroom, you're not going to get, even if you have a knockout editorial tomorrow, you're not going to get a blue star, because that just doesn't go. And it's the same way with public hearings. A public hearing, this virtual public hearing, is like taking a shower with your bathing suit on. It just doesn't count for anything. It's not like being down there, especially if you've got hard-hitting testimony, and looking the senator right in the eye and saying, Senator, this idea is counterproductive. Boo. Yeah. And I'm afraid this is what I'm apprehensive about, that we'll get so used to this virtual stuff that we'll get into the habit of, we don't have to have a meeting, we'll just do it virtual. It's a lot easier. We don't have to leave our offices. We don't have to get dressed up. What's his name? The lawyer that did so well on the TV tube, Toom, Toomey?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll come to me in just a second.
Disney did an animated film, and I didn't see the whole thing, but I saw the gist of it. I think it was called WALL-E or something.
Uh-huh.
And pretty much the Earth had relocated into these substations in space, and everybody was in chairs, and everything was just done right in front of them.
Yeah.
They didn't move. They were all sedentary.
Yeah.
And everything was virtual.
Yeah.
Fun movie.
I think that's going to be very tempting for an awful lot of folks here on the island. And I'm against it, if anybody cares. I am absolutely against it. The sooner we can get back to real meetings, real hearings, real school, the happier I will be. Okay, next on the card is the Post, and there's a lot to talk about here because I got to talk not only about the editorial but about Senators Brown, Torres, and Moylan. I know there's somebody trying to get in the green room here. I hope there's not a long line outside the green room, so I'll wait a second here. We don't want to duplicate a rev tax by having a lot of people out there in the green room.
They're gonna call back. They just had a question about GDOE, which you're talking about, but he'll call back.
Okay, good. Okay, so here we go with first item on the card, which is, I'm sorry, the second editorial. It's the Post editorial. Now isn't the time to even think about pay raises for GovGuam. A nice way to phrase it. Back in the day before we really turned the corner on smoking, I used to have a sign that I'd put in my office that said, "Don't even think about smoking here." So I can understand the messagery here. And once again, I got somebody trying to get into the green room. I hope. If not, yeah, it's Brian. So we'll hold up on going into the Post, and we'll entertain Brian because we don't want to have a line that's 4 miles long outside the green room and pretend that we're rev tax.
He's been up since yesterday.
Brian has. Good afternoon, Brian.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. How are you?
Doing great.
Thank you. I've got a quick question. I'm just curious what the jurisdiction is with the governor canceling school for the private schools, but not being able to cancel schools for, let's say, Dodea. And just on a side note with that, the PEB cards or whatever those are, the SNAP benefit cards, they're able to get cards distributed to Dodea students or their parents and not private schools. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well,
I can wait offline.
No, hang on, Brian.
Okay,
I always like to be talking to somebody else. You know, Brian, at my age, I like to talk to somebody else. At my age, I spend enough time talking to myself as it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, why is it enforced at DOD schools? Well, I think the reason is because the governor doesn't want to. Because she could certainly give it what's called the old college try. She has quarantine authority for the whole island by virtue of a federal statute. So, you know, the guy over here in the lazy boy, the smart money, oh yeah, but the federal government is supreme. Remember the supremacy clause? Well, it doesn't necessarily follow because we know that that when it comes to things like that, our EPA folks can have an impact on what the feds do. Yeah, anywhere nationwide. Now, so she could issue that edict and say all schools, I don't care if you're public, private, or Guam High School, you're closed because of this pandemic. It would have to be, you know, properly worded, of course. You couldn't have the janitor write it on the back of an envelope, but if it were properly worded. The next question is, if she did that and the military didn't comply, how would enforcement be affected? And the answer to that is probably it wouldn't be affected. So, but I think the initial answer is because she doesn't want to. She could see that it would be problematic, and it's, as we sometimes say, it's not the mountain she wants to die on. As far as what were the cards called?
Private schools. I'm curious about what her jurisdiction is on private schools, like Catholic schools or.
It's the same as it is on restaurants, bars, everywhere else. You know, if you go to Jacobson versus Massachusetts, she has very broad powers to combat a disease if she does it right. And it would be the same thing for private schools.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, it's nice talking to you, Brian. Call again sometime, huh?
We'll do. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we're lining up here just like we're Rev Tax. We've got Kellis. Good afternoon, Kellis.
Hey, Beast. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
So you're talking about federal primacy and all that type of stuff, something that I just thought of. Well, off base, evidently GovGuam mandates the Fed because you can smoke marijuana, it's legal off base. But on base, marijuana is illegal. And also, as an active duty military member, if you smoke marijuana, you can get in trouble.
Sure.
So, but you're like, you got states and, territories where marijuana is legal. So, for example, Colorado, Guam, etc. But if as an active duty military member, if I smoke it while I'm here, I can get in trouble.
Yeah, and the reason for that is simple, that military members are not subject to the civil laws of Guam. They're subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice when it comes to, Kellis, when it comes to criminal-style discipline. So it doesn't matter where the smoking took place. Smoking where it's legal under state law doesn't immunize you from punishment under the UCMJ.
But then what I was sitting there thinking about, because when you said earlier that the Fed trumps state, so, but we heard...
I didn't say that. I didn't say that, Kellis.
Oh, I thought somebody said that then. But
No.
yeah, what I'm saying is that the states, but isn't, so if the state says something is legal and the Fed says something is illegal, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, there have been cases like there was a statute that required chiefs of police to keep track of firearms records. It was called the Brady Bill. And when it got to the Supreme Court said you can't force state officials to do that. We had another one, drug-free schools, same thing. So the feds, at least, the way it's supposed to be, they have to have a jurisdictional hook to hang their head on. They have to be acting within their commerce power or some other enumerated power in the Constitution, but they've gotten around that with this horrible system of federal programs where they blackmail states into doing stuff that they don't have the authority to require.
If you don't do this, you lose your highway funds.
Yeah.
So I got a kind of a quick question about that. If for voting, if the federal government passes the voting law, right?
Yeah.
Guam doesn't have to follow it.
Because
you just like if Guam or if Colorado or Kansas, they can say our voting rules apply. In,
I get you. In other words, each state could comply with the United States Constitution and not the statute, because the statute clearly goes beyond constitutional bounds. No question about that.
Unless they add it to the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Would that be it?
Well, yeah.
If they came up.
But
that takes how many states to do that?
It takes 2/3 of the members of Congress and 3/4 of the states to amend the Constitution.
Right. So that's what would have to happen if they want a true federal voting law. That's what they would have to do.
That's right.
Okay. Because that's all I wanted. Because I just thought of that as we were talking. But okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Judge.
Okay, Kellis.
You have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to take a break, and then it was another Joe ahead of Drive-Through Jack. Okay, then another Joe, and then Drive-Through Jack.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafare, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so we got another Joe at leadoff and drive-through Jack batting cleanup from the drive-through. Good morning or good afternoon, another Joe.
Hey, Bob. So you're saying that the DODEA schools and the private schools are doing things differently than GDOE. So that's what you're saying?
What is the question?
The different school systems are being handled differently?
No, as I understand it, all of the schools, all of the private schools and public schools are closed. I don't know what DODEA did. I'm not on their. They're open. Okay.
Wouldn't it just make for a good test? Not to sound too dangerous, but wouldn't this make for a good test case if there aren't a lot of kids that are getting seriously sick? They all have mild conditions. Wouldn't this be a good test case to see if if they can stay in school, and just get through it? And you got this herd immunity thing going on.
Well, the governor says she doesn't. The governor is talking about speed. And the speed of the measures she employs. So she doesn't want slow when it comes to speed. She doesn't want fast. What she wants is half-fast. That's what she said. Half-fast.
Is this supposed to be a bell or something?
Jose's answering the phone.
Oh, it sounds like another word that I don't know if I'm not sure if I can repeat on here.
Yeah.
But it just kind of makes sense if you have an isolated demographic and they're mostly on base. They're living separate on the base. If you have few live off base in the economy.
Well, I see what you're driving at. I didn't quite grasp it at first, but you're saying so we check the numbers. DODEA kids are going to school. What is the incidence of virus infection there compared to Guam kids not going to school? Compare and contrast. And if they're the same, then why stay home from school, right?
Something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Another Joe.
Yeah, I'll just keep listening. Thanks a lot. Take care.
All righty. Okay, so let's see. I got another Jack. I got drive-through Jack on the line, and I got Martinez on the line. Starting out with drive-through Jack. Go ahead, drive-through Jack.
Hi, good morning, Bob. I just want you to be aware that most of these articles and most of this stuff coming out of the paper, when they try to explain something away, they always seem to start with, "Oh, we knew this was going to happen," or yes, we talked about it, and it was going to happen. Whether it's the Afghanistan fiasco, whether it's the RISE Act, or whether it has to do with the surges in the Wuhan virus, they always start that. But nowhere in printed record, do they state that. It seems just like what we talked about it behind closed doors, meetings, or whatever. But they never brought it up. It's just when the stuff happens, they always come up with the excuse that, "Oh, we knew that was going to happen." And I want you to be aware of that, because that's been coming out a lot lately, that the explanation and how they explain it away is that, "Oh, we knew this was going to happen," which they don't. They never did. And if they did, it wasn't in print. Number two, I was really concerned about these mandates, because as you're aware, mandates and executive orders, they really lack the built-in checks and balances into the policies and stuff like that. And I know that you mentioned the Organic Act, but if we always talk about the Attorney General, but actually that office is, it's really new. And I was wondering, with all these mandates and executive orders, why is the Attorney General silent on these issues? And even on the federal level, why is the district attorney here in Guam silent on these issues, especially when it's a question of constitutional rights? And I was wondering if you could give me a take on that.
Yeah, well, we had the first attorney general we had, which was Doug Moylan, apparently would pursue anybody for just about anything. He was followed by Lenny Rapadas, who wouldn't pursue anybody for anything, followed by Alicia Limtiaco, who wouldn't pursue anything. And I'm afraid we've established a trend that Leven Camacho really good at filing motions to join off-island class actions and joining with other attorney generals and filing amicus papers. But when it comes to getting involved with local government, he seems to be pretty shy. And I suspect that this is the way he reads Guam politics. That the nail that sticks up the highest is the one that gets hammered the first. And then maybe just by being a nice guy, pandering to the separatists, not taking any aggressive stands on anything else, he'll be able to make a career out of being Attorney General. I don't know. That's only my speculation. Drive through, Jack.
Okay, so the reason he's not involved is out of choice, not by out of law or about, duty or anything. It's out of choice that he's not involved.
Well, a lawyer who wants to can find a reason to get involved in just about anything. And his organic statute says that he has the power of a common law attorney general, which means if he wants to do something and he can find a case that said the attorney general of Ipswich, New Jersey could do it, he can do it.
Yeah, so I suspect that if I don't know if he's still in office, Fred Black on the federal side, that he'd probably do the same thing as Doug, pursue something that he finds wrong or corruption involved. So that's the point I just wanted to make, is that he seems the office of Attorney General and the district attorney on the Fed side are silent on these issues.
Well, a good example is when Governor Calvo gave retroactive raises to his staff, which is clearly illegal. The Attorney General said, I gave an opinion that said it was illegal, therefore I would have a conflict if my office tried to prosecute it. Therefore, we're going to hire independent counsel. And they fumbled that ball. It's kind of like, who's going to pay for the round of drinks? The guy that has the hardest time getting the money out of his billfold skates, right? So they fumbled that one around to the point where they never hired counsel and it never went anywhere at all. So, of course, people who were watching this are saying, why did she write an opinion? Why didn't she just prosecute from the get-go?
Yes. So, Bob, I'm listening in, and I'm just wondering about those things. And I just a little caveat. Whenever you see in print that we knew this was going to happen, I can guarantee 100% they never knew anything was going to happen. And the journalists that are involved aren't pursuing these avenues, and they just take it as a grain of salt that, oh yeah, it was bound, it's fait accompli, and it wasn't.
Well,
so
the sad sack woke up one morning after things had really turned to ashes on him. He woke up and sipping his first cup of coffee said, man, things are really bad. But they could get worse. And he was right. They got worse.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bob. And I'll be listening in on the other end.
All right, drive through, Jack.
We knew it was going to get worse.
Yeah. Okay, I got Martinez coming up next. Let's see, what does Martinez want to talk about again here?
I think one of the overrides of one of the vetoes.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that in Zemi-Yakotny, but I'll let him get in now, even though I'm going to get into it in Zemi-Yakotny. I mean, yeah, on the Post editorial. Yeah, go ahead, Martinez.
Bob, it's the end of the day, and this really happens. But then you had to make 3 personal phone calls Did you finish the editorials or not yet?
I finished the first one. I'm going into the second one, in which I will talk about Mary Torres and the veto. So if you want to hang on until then, it would be. If you want to hang on when I'm not talking, Martinez, if you want to hang on when I'm talking, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I kind of like to finish my sentences. So I was going to say, I'm saying that I'm going to talk about it in the editorial. So if you wanted to hang on until after I go through the post editorial, your comments would probably be more relevant to what we're talking about on the air.
Okay, then maybe I'll call back. Or you want me just to hold out to the phone? What do you prefer?
Yeah, why don't you call back after I finish the post editorial and after I talk about Mary Torres?
Thank you, Senator.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on. Okay. So nobody else in the green room, right?
All clear.
Yeah, I don't want the green room to be confused with the rear entrance to Rev Tax. So the title there is, Now Isn't the Time to Even Think About Pay Raises for Gov Guam. Indifference has become more evident among members of the Guam legislature about the thousands of people in Guam's workforce who will be out of jobless benefits in a matter of days or already have been without benefits for weeks or months. In the final stretch to craft the government of Guam budget for the fiscal year that starts October 1, there was hardly any acknowledgement that thousands of households are about to see some of the worst financial struggles of this pandemic. Now the direct federal cash assistance has dried up. Eyes were on the legislature and the administration to see whether Gov Guam would be able to quickly put together a program or programs so far-reaching that they would effectively offer a cushion for the vast majority of soon-to-be displaced or already displaced private sector workers, so their fall wouldn't be that crushing. There wasn't anything remotely related to standing up an additional program authorized by law to provide some sustained cash aid to the workers in the private sector who will have nothing in a matter of days. One thing that senators did preoccupy themselves with in the run-up to finalizing the budget was to execute a plethora of lawmaking maneuvers that could ultimately provide additional benefits and or pay increases that would then jack up the cost of the Gov Guam payroll. Lawmakers passed amendments related to 1, paving the way for compensation and benefits for the Guam Department of Education. 2, authorizing a move towards a pay scale plan for peace officers in general. 3, providing hazard pay for Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency officers. And this is ensuring that nurses' pay increases are provided for in fiscal 22. That, by the way, is Mary Torres. This is just a partial list. Pages of the Gov Guam proposal still have to be fully grasped. This is not to disregard the hard work of Gov Guam employees for whom the pay raises are being championed. This is a question about senators' abilities to see the bigger community beyond the Gov Guam circle and to recognize the problem that lies ahead for thousands of families outside the government's sphere. Do nurses, peace officers, and teachers deserve better pay in comparison to national average? Yeah, they probably do. Is it the right time? Hell no. That's my ad lib. Its editorial actually says most definitely not. It's unconscionable to attempt to boost the paychecks of those in Gov Guam who have not taken a single week of reduced pay or a single month of layoffs in this pandemic. And it's disheartening to see lawmakers ignore that the private sector workers might not have seen the worst of their financial storm in this pandemic. The difference between their suffering now and a few weeks from now will be profound. It's not the private sector workers' fault that tourism and its related sectors have not been able to rebound. The $2 billion plus tourism industry on Guam remains near bottom of the downturn. Could elected officials have done better and done right by the private sector workers? Absolutely. Are they going to do something that's truly impactful to improve the plight of the labor force in Guam's private sector? We have not seen it, nor in a major impactful way so far. Now, there are some stories, news articles that get into the budget, and the Post, as usual, is right on top of it. Lawmakers override veto on one bill that amends RISE Act. And it also goes on to talk about let me see where that article is here. Oh, yeah. The article that I'm looking for ran on KUAM. Senators pass fiscal year 2022 budget bill. Just before 10:30 Tuesday night, senators passed Bill 55, the fiscal year 2022 budget bill. The vote was 11 yes, 3 no, and 1 excused absence. The 3 who voted against its passage were Republican Senators Tello Taitigui, Mary Torres, and Joanne Brown. And Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes wasn't there. Why should she be? She's too busy worrying about the insular cases. Okay, cutting to Senator Brown. Senator Brown said she voted against the bill for several reasons, including that it does not set aside more money to prepare for the unknowns. The Republican lawmaker added that her colleagues should have forced the governor to fund those areas in the government that were adversely affected as a result of the pandemic. Quote, yet we still have to wait. We still don't know how she plans to spend this money, not just for a hospital. It's not going to address the immediate priorities facing our people right now, and that's where our priority should have been, to pursue the issues that is within our authority, to be conservative, to set aside money for that rainy day, because I don't think that rainy day is far off if things continue as they are, Brown said. And she's absolutely right. You know, we thought we were out of the woods on coronavirus, but although we got out of the woods, it started to rain again, didn't it? So she's absolutely right on that, and the Post is absolutely right. The last thing we need to do is talk about raising government employees' salaries when they all some of them sat at home and they all never missed a nickel's worth of pay. And now we want to give them a raise for all the good work they did while they were staying home. This same article goes on and says lawmakers also voted to override the governor's veto of Bill 75. The measure would increase the RISE program's payments, extend the program by 6 months, and lift the $30 million cap. The bill's main sponsor, Senator James Moylan, said that while he understands overriding the legislation may not do so much in forcing the governor to increase payouts of the RISE Act, well, he's right about that because it won't do anything, or even lift the cap. Quote, this is what Moylan said, but it will simply send a strong message to the executive branch that the legislative branch is a co-equal branch of government and wants to work with the governor in addressing economic recovery. Well, Bill 11 would have sent a strong message, Jim Moylan, and the Bob and Ray resolution would have sent. But you recall when the Bob and Ray resolution was first set up, Jose, we got some senators talk about it. Senator Moylan wouldn't even talk about it. He never said boo about it. At least Tello objected to having her name on it. Okay, so that's the RISE Act. Senator Mary Torres was the only one present that voted no to the override, while Vice Speaker Barnes was excused. So, and then we have the lawmakers' override veto on the bill that amends the RISE Act, which ran on Post. 13 lawmakers have overridden the governor's veto on one bill amending the RISE Act. Only Senator Mary Torres voted against the override. All other senators voted yes. Vice Speaker Barnes was excused. An override was also held on the RISE Act amendment in Bill 164, but it failed to get the 10 votes. The RISE Act, a product of the 35th Guam legislature, was not implemented despite being allowed to lapse into law. Instead, the governor created her own version of the program called All Rise because she holds authority over the American Rescue Plan funding that will support RISE payments. She also held a number of concerns with the original RISE Act and the amendments, including eligibility requirements needed to align with the federal guidance. Yeah, because it didn't apply to the governor. Okay, let's take a short break here. I'll come back, finish this up, and it would be a good time for you to call, Martinez.
As we end Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA, on September 4th, the Guam Department of Labor is still committed to assisting you with your employment and unemployment needs. Call 311 to book an appointment for help with claim issues, appeals, and overpayments. For new applications, the deadline to apply is October 4th. Are you still trying to get back on your feet? Let GDOL and the American Job Center assist you by calling 475-7000 or 7001. Visit dol.guam.gov for more information.
Diving and seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free TOCA app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOCA or install the free TOCA app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
Okay, so here we are back on the air. And by the way, Nate Horn tells me that the name I was looking for, a guy who probably dislikes virtual meetings and Zoom meetings as much as I do, Jeffrey Toobin.
Oh, yeah, Toobin.
Yeah. Okay, so Mary Torres voted against the budget bill. She voted against the override of the veto on the All Rise program, and it seems like Mary Torres is a classic contrarian. Whatever the Republicans want to do, Mary Torres doesn't want to do, even when she was the one that made the amendment to cover nurses' pay increases out of the budgets of the health care departments that did not get an appropriation. Now, I've seen people vote to amend a bill and then vote against the bill before, but it's usually because their amendment is to soften, to decrease the mischief of the bill, which they still don't like even with decreased mischief. But it's not the usual practice to amend a bill and put your own pork in it, and then when the bill comes up for vote, you vote against it. But of course, Torres comes where in the alphabet? So she could see that the bill would pass and the nurses
quarterbacking.
Yeah, and she didn't even need to pass. That was the advantage that Judy Wonpat had for all those years. I was thinking my middle name is Wallace, Wallace, for sure related to William Wallace in Scotland, right? I was tempted to call myself Robert Wallace, or maybe Robert Klitzkie Wallace, but I never did. It would have seemed to not be the way the system should work. Okay, so we got the big halftime show coming up, and Martinez hasn't called back. Probably not a good time. Martinez can call back right after the big halftime show. I'll take a look at a couple things in Facebook that I think are interesting. Peter Santos either wrote a really long post on Facebook or he said he had a sort of long post that he repeated. We never know with repeat.
Well, he
right?
starts out the subject with long line, and I was like, oh, do I have to stand and wait to read this?
And then he also said, somewhere along the line, probably the worst Republican ever. And I don't have enough time to scroll around to find out who that was. Do you know who it was?
I thought he was talking about Torres, but it's Moylan he mentioned in his
probably the worst Republican ever. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, Peter Santos, long line to get the rev tax this morning to apply for Viagra. I guess so. And Pamela Duval chimes in and says the only thing consistent in government is inconsistency. And who else? Jose Ted Pajago. Most of the homes on Guam are majority multifamily dwellings. By closing schools, do these folks realize that the only positive aspect on their day is at school? Another thing is that these families would most likely not be practicing safe distancing because they won't be allowed to go outside and get that sun. Just my 4 cents, he said. And then yesterday, remember, we had Mike Rudolph, who said that his kids, force of habit, got up and got ready for school. And when they found out no school, they were just crushed because they wanted to go to school.
I would see that.
Yeah. And of course, most kids, until maybe they get to the last part of their senior year, love school. They want to go to school.
Do you ever remember experiencing cabin fever when you're in Wisconsin?
Only in the wintertime.
Yeah, especially in the wintertime.
Yeah. And the really nice thing about wintertime in Wisconsin was we'd have snow days and we could break cabin fever because you get out and do all kinds of stuff because no school. But we also had senior skip day during the winter where everybody would skip, and it was at Mokibo. It was one of those things that everybody understood, but nobody talked about.
Is that like in the Dells?
This was down in Elkhorn. Elkhorn's about 100 miles south of the Dells.
Never mind. I got that now.
Yeah.
Got the reference. You're faster than me.
Elkhorn, yeah. Okay, yeah, Mokibo came from, I think, Papua New Guinea. Or I think it was Papua New Guinea.
Something you don't talk about.
Yeah,
Talked about.
Something that everybody knows, but we agree not to talk about. Okay, are we ready for the big halftime show, Jose?
We got a few seconds left.
Yeah, okay, so we'll have the big halftime show. I'm pretty much finished here with Zemi Cotney, Mary Torres, Jim Moylan, Joanne Brown, etc., so we can go on to the card. And the first item in the card is Ed Santos versus the governor.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A Navy helicopter crashes. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The Navy says it's rescued one crew member from a helicopter that crashed yesterday off the coast of San Diego and is searching for the other 5.
This helicopter crash happened about 60 miles off the San Diego coast. The Navy says it was an MH-60S helicopter embarked on the USS Abraham Lincoln. It was conducting routine flight operations when it crashed.
Kelsey Christensen with Fox 5 San Diego. President Biden defends his decision to end the war in Afghanistan and how he handled evacuations.
President Biden saying if evacuations had started before the Taliban took over, there would have been a breakdown in confidence in the Afghan government.
I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit.
The president said the real choice was between leaving or escalating our presence in Afghanistan. At the White House, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin's blasting the president for failing in Afghanistan.
12 Marines and 1 sailor dead that did not need to die is not a success. Hundreds of Americans left behind. Thousands more of our Afghan allies effectively condemned to death under the Taliban is not a success.
Gallagher speaking to Fox News. Conditions in hurricane-ravaged Louisiana and Mississippi are dire, with hundreds of thousands without power, a shortage of supplies and gasoline, and widespread damage.
If you're listening to this out of town, stay there. Do not come back. There's no cell service, no Wi-Fi, no water. There's nothing to come back to right now, so stay where you are.
Jefferson Parish President Cynthia Lee Sheng. America's listening to Fox News.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Prosecutors in Detroit drop a decades-old conviction of a man connected to a house fire that killed 5 children.
Juwan Deering's life sentence for killing 5 kids in a Royal Oak Township, Michigan house fire 21 years ago has been vacated after the Oakland County prosecutor Karen McDonald convened a special prosecutor in the case that she calls troubling, including investigators' video of a surviving child and a photo lineup.
He says that Juwan didn't do it. No one in my office and none of Mr. Deering's attorneys had ever seen or heard about this photo lineup and this investigation. The jury never saw or heard any of that.
Or the use of jailhouse informants in exchange for reduced sentences. Deering's case was the subject of the Michigan Innocence Project that also alleges outdated arson techniques were used in this case. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
People in Texas will have to vote under new rules after Republicans approved a bill yesterday they say will provide better election security. The passage ends a long battle with Democrats, including those who left the state in an effort to kill the legislation. GOP Governor Abbott plans to sign the bill. Bonnaroo cancels its festival planned for Manchester, Tennessee.
Even though the weather for the weekend's festival is perfect, the grounds are saturated, according to a statement posted on the festival's website. And the campgrounds surrounding the festival is also flooded to the point that vehicles are unable to drive or park safely. They added they have done everything to try and make the event happen and blamed Mother Nature for the tremendous amount of rain. Ticket holders will be refunded. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
And Dow futures up more than 100 points, suggesting the markets will open higher on the first day of September. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
As As we end pandemic unemployment assistance, or PUA, on September 4th, the Guam Department of Labor is still committed to assisting you with your employment and unemployment needs. Call 311 to book an appointment for help with claim issues, appeals, and overpayments. For new applications, the deadline to apply is October 4th. Are you still trying to get back on your feet? Let GDOL and the American Job Center assist you by calling 475-7000 or 7001. Visit dol.guam.gov for more information.
Okay, so here we are. Here we go on the card. First item on the card is Ed Santos versus the governor. And this comes from an article in the Post. Disabled veteran sleeps in parking lot to beat the line for economic aid. And if you saw a hard copy, you could see this guy sitting in the front seat of his car. And it's clear that he only has one actual leg and the prosthetic leg. Ed Santos is 65 and he wears prosthetics for a missing leg. Knowing that he couldn't stand for what could be hours and hours long line for today's start of the filing for the all-rise direct financial aid for qualified Guamanians who need help in this pandemic, the veteran who served in Iraq couldn't take his chances. On Tuesday night, Santos was in his car, which was parked at the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation, determined to be the first to file for the economic aid. The filing begins at 7 a.m. online through drive-through service or walk-in at RevTax. I wanted to make sure I get this paperwork, that they receive it right, so that in case it gets lost somewhere along the line, I got a document saying the day I turned it in and the time. That's what I'm looking for, Santos said. He was in for a long night. He parked at RevTax before 7 p.m. The line opens 12 hours later. Santos said while there are parking slots reserved for people with disabilities in general and a line for senior citizens to be in the front, there's no specific spot for people who have challenges moving around. And I have to once again add parenthetically here, these spaces reserved for people with disabilities. Not long ago, I ran into someone that I hadn't seen for a while, parked in one of these parking places. And I said, you know, we chatted for a while, and I said, gosh, I didn't know you were disabled. This person seemed to be fully able-bodied to me. And the person said, oh, it's my father. I came to get water for him. And I said, but you're not disabled. No, but my father is. That's why I've got the placard.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's not what it's for.
No, it isn't. And I remember when Senator Adolfo Palacios, I believe it was in a public hearing, he was talking about the Cape Volunteers, who I wonder are still, if they're still operating, but Cape Volunteers are civilians who go through training and they're given citation booklets and they can write tickets for disabled parking violations. So Palacios was telling this sad story that he witnessed. He said he saw this Cape volunteer, he saw this guy pull up, get out of his car and go in the store, and he saw the Cape volunteer start to write the ticket. But the disabled person was sitting right in the car. How stupid could that Cape volunteer be? You know, you should ask when you see someone park his car in the disabled parking at the Paseo and then go out and run, you should ask him, is there a disabled person in your car? Yeah, then it would be okay. What could drive many Guam residents to scramble to be early is the government's plan to limit federal funding for the All Rise aid to $30 million, even after the governor expanded eligibility from displaced private sector workers to also include thousands of GovGuam federal employees and retirees. The income limit to qualify is $40,000 for individual taxpayers, $80,000 for a couple who filed their tax return jointly. Mayor's offices, Mayor's Council of Guam will be helping residents file their All Rise applications. The economic benefit could be less than $500 to around $800 for each qualified applicant, but the amount will depend on how many people apply and will have to share the $30 million under the cap. Well, that sounds a little different than first come, first serve. So the way this story reads, they're going to wait till, I don't know how they'll do that, because there'll have to be a cutoff when they say we're not accepting any more applications. Where from the beginning, from the get-go, we've been told it's first come, first serve, and that's why Ed Santos is down there. So speaking about the program in general, I think it would take a really skillful 3 or 4 people to come up with a scheme that was more fouled up than this one from the very get-go. You'll recall that it was Raging Lee's bill. It was $30 million. She said, spend the federal money first, and if that's not enough, there's an appropriation here for local funds. The governor didn't like it, so she let it become law without her signature, and she expressed her displeasure because she thought this is discriminatory. You know, it discriminates against GovGuam employees because GovGuam employees don't get any money.
What if the GovGuam employee is unvaccinated?
Yeah, she should have thought of that, right? That would have been a good one. So she said, and I'm going to ask the Attorney General because I think this is discriminatory. And the Attorney General wrote back and said, you know, have an idea when you talk. You know, obviously there's a rational government purpose here to provide some assistance to people who got laid off, et cetera, compared to those that didn't miss a day's work. Well, they missed a day's work because they got to stay home. They didn't miss a day's pay. So that just went nowhere at all. So then there was a lot of aggressive comments directed towards the governor saying, when are you going to do this? When are you going to start paying this money? She let everybody know, you know, this money that comes from the national government is mine. I can spend it any way I want to. And I didn't see the video where she said, any way I want to, nah, 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 nah. But I suspect it's floating around out there somewhere. So she never paid anything against it. And then the next thing she did was she co-opted it herself. And she said, I'm going to have a program called not Rise, but All Rise. So it'll be my All Rise program. And I'll pay GovGuam employees.
Co-op, is that the nice way of saying plagiarize?
Or stole.
Or stole.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to pay everybody, GovGuam employees, etc., in the same, according to the same criteria as Raging Lee's All Rise Act. And then she said, but I'm only going to pay out $30 million, no more than that. Well, Governor, what if there are more applicants than money to go around? First come, first served. Nah, nah, nah. Right? And then she must have had, about 3 weeks ago, I talked in terms of what the Army calls systems, operations research and systems analysis. And what someone who is trained in that discipline does, he figures out how many lines, how many counters, how many doors, how to set up your parking lot, your traffic flows. Do we need more buses, less buses? Should we let people drive? You know, this is operations research and systems analysis. So when you're doing stuff like this, you come up with stuff that works really well. Rube Goldberg is not part of the Army team, but he's apparently part of Lou's team. So the first thing she said, and she could set up the eligibility any way she wanted to because it's not bound by statute. So the first thing she says is, you got to have residence verification from your mayor's office. So a lot of people, probably the same thing, showed up at the mayor's office at dark 30, got these verifications. The mayors didn't like it. They raised hell. Nobody liked it very much. So then she says, she turns it over to Daphne Shimizu at RevTax, and Daphne says, oh, no, we won't do that. We'll do something else. So all of the folks that stood in line said, what did we get from standing in line? Does that mean that we're first in line and the first come, first served? Sorry, Charlie. It doesn't mean anything except you got to stand in line for no reason whatsoever. So then we have this cluster fumble down at RevTax this morning where poor old Ed Santos has to sleep in his car in order to accommodate this. Now, wouldn't it have made as much sense to have several collection points for these? If you have to actually have someone hand you the paper, wouldn't that have made sense? Couldn't you, if you like your mayor, you could use your mayor, Barack Obama said. So if they were reliable enough to issue this residence statement, couldn't they accept the papers and turn them into a central point? Couldn't there have been some way to save people for standing in those long, long lines over at RevTax? Couldn't we have some way to accommodate folks like Ed Santos? And this is a repeat performance, because when we first started doing Wuhan vaccines or maybe it was tests over at Ukadu High School, people had to wait in their cars until they were called in, which meant a lot of folks that weren't really very apt at waiting in their cars spent long periods of time waiting in their cars. People that really shouldn't have been doing that, people with disabilities, etc. So, and then the edict is that either you go through that line or you get out of your car and stand in line inside a RevTax, or you file online. I already heard this morning on Ray's show, who would have thought it would be any other way, that their computer crashed? Too much traffic. So the whole thing was just a gigantic failure. And there's just no getting around the fact that it was a gigantic failure. And although conventional wisdom holds that governors who give people money, governor may not come out so well on this. I got a feeling that this is going to be remembered for an awful long, long time. Then, in addition to the lack of operations research and systems analysis, we have a letter to the editor that ran in the PDN from a guy named, I don't have his name, Bradley, D.A. Bradley. I wonder if that's Dan Bradley. There aren't that many Bradleys on the island. I am writing this letter to hopefully let hundreds, if not thousands, of our Guam residents that they are about to be robbed. One of the eligibility requirements for the governor's All Wise program is that you must have filed a 2020 Guam tax return. But wait a minute. The exact wording is that the tax return must have been filed and then processed by RevTax. Guess what? If you file later than April of this year, you will not receive any money from the All Rise program. Getting robbed. And then in addition to that, you know, if your income doesn't reach a certain level, you don't have to file an income tax return. This, of course, would be the poorest people on the island who would not have filed a tax return. So then we're told, well, you have to have filed a tax return in order to get the all-rise money. So if you haven't filed one yet, file it now and just show no income, because if you don't, you can't get it. So we're discriminating, we're invidiously discriminating against the poorest people, the ones that didn't file an income tax return. And not, criminally not filing doesn't count. He goes on to say, I called RevTax and was told that I would not be eligible since I filed my return in June. The reason I filed in June was that I had been previously told by RevTax officials that since only my revenue was Social Security, I did not have to file. Well, in June, and by the way, they moved the deadline forward, didn't they? Yeah, from April to June. Well, in June, I found out that even though I'm not required to file. If I didn't file, I wouldn't receive a third stimulus check. So I filed, but that check is not processed yet because my return is not processed. I also never received a second stimulus check because the instructions advise that if you're a Social Security recipient, your payment would be made automatically to the bank account on your that your Social Security checks were sent to. After everyone in my family received their second checks, I called RevTax. After repeated calls, was advised by Daphne Shimizu that it was impossible for RevTax to do that since they had no access to Social Security rolls. What really irks me is that I have a stamped received 2020 tax return, but because RevTax cannot do their job in a timely fashion, they refuse to acknowledge I have filed my 2020 tax return. I find it to be extremely onerous that I will not be able to avail myself of funds made to, quote, rescue people like myself because RevTax inability to, quote, process returns in a timely fashion. I also find it to be highly suspect of the administration's strategy in setting eligibility requirements that all the GovGuam people who were paid throughout the pandemic definitely filed because they had an income, of course. So it looks to me like the largest voting bloc on island, GovGuam workers, were put to the top of the line when they actually had no need to be rescued to begin with. Oh, don't forget the words of the governor that when the $30 million runs out, that's the end. If the 2020 tax filing is really needed, why can't we include the stamped received copy of our return instead of expecting RevTax to actually perform what we, the public, to pay them to do? Call the governor's office and the legislature and demand that this wrong be right. And then, of course, a really easy question, how long does it take to process a tax return that shows no income? As Rush Limbaugh would say, I could do that with half my brain tied behind my back, right? Okay, so that's the first item on the card, and I got three folks here online. Let's see who I got waiting we got Martinez. He wants to talk about the override of the veto. We've got R. Keith, GovGuam workers, and all rise line. And we've got Senator Chris Duenas. So we got to go to Wrigley Field for the seventh inning stretch. When I'm in Wrigley Field, I'll see if I can find Martinez, and we'll talk about the override.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Diving in, seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free Toka app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOKA or install the free Toka app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
So here we are in Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. Only 400 feet to the center field bleachers. Yeah, short center field. And leaving Wrigley Field, I got Martinez on line one, so go for it, Martinez.
Thank you, Senator. Two things before I go on. You know, veteran callers like Another Joe and Drive-Thru Jacks, you know better to give you the courtesy to finish both the editorials before they called. I always do that. That's why I called in, because those two were calling in, and the other one might not have been a veteran, but next time you should give you courtesy. The second thing, Doug Moylan, our first elected Attorney General, was followed in 2006 by Alicia Limtiaco, and she was followed in 2010 by Lenny Rapaz. That's when they switched positions. Alicia went from AG to U.S. Attorney, and Lenny went from U.S. Attorney to AG. And I remember seeing Lenny in 2003 when he first got it. He liked baseball. And I said, well, the catcher for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, in those days they were called the Devil Rays, not Rays, they reported his attorney, former U.S. Attorney so-and-so, was representing him on this case. So I said, the title's going to be you for life. If you represent somebody, you'll be known as a former U.S. Attorney. But here's why I called. You said, Senator, that 3 Republicans did not support the override, Tydegui, Brown, and Torres. Is that correct?
Did not support the budget.
Well, the budget. But the override, another station is reporting that it was only Senator. You know, it's very hard to override Little Lulu. The override and the overrides, only Senator Mary Camacho Torres did not vote for the override. Do you know if that's true?
That's what
the station said that.
That's what the paper said.
Okay. If that's true, here we go again. She's the governor's girl, and I told you her chief of staff's husband is making $110,000 as the deputy manager at GMH. Her sister-in-law is making another $110,000 as deputy manager at Gita. She's in the governor's pocket. Her daughter's a nurse. The governor's pushing nurses' pay. Her safety, her thing for child adoption. Both the seasoned, experienced director of public health and the one from Child Protective Service, they testified against it. Little Lulu pulled them back to support Torres. It's time now, and Senator Chris Dueñas, who's our minority leader, it's time now for our minority leader, Senator Chris Dueñas, and Senators Frank Bloss, who's a former minority leader, Senator Anthony Ada, these are experienced people, who's a former minority leader, Senator Tello Tydegui, who's a former minority leader, Senator Jim Moy, who's a former minority leader, and Senator Joanne Brown, who's got more experience than all of them on her 7th term, to publicly, because I learned it from you can do it, pass a resolution, give it to the media to expel her from the Republican caucus, make it public. In 2009, the Democratic Party, I liked them, went public, because Governor Guerrero, you know, a long-time Democrat, appointed governor for 6.5 years candidate, supported Paul Cowell in the 78 election, and Andy Gill, the secretary of the Democratic Party, a long-time supported Paul Cowell. They both got rewarded. Governor Guerrero got general manager, made a lot of money at the airport, and Andy Gill got, remember, this is 1979, a $205,000 lawyer job. The Democratic Party went public, make sure the media saw and expelled both of them from the party. So I challenge Chris Dueñas and these other veteran senators, expel her from the caucus. And if you don't do it because you don't want to upset people, then you're saying any Republican can do it. All I got to say, I'll hear what Chris Dueñas, our minority leaders, have to say, and the others. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, Martinez, thank you for calling. Yeah, that's a hard-hitting call, if there ever were one. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I've got Chris, I think, is on line 3, and I've got R. Keith on line 2. Go for it, R. Keith.
Good afternoon, Bob. I certainly don't have the emotional impact of Martinez. He was that was quite a call. I was astute of the columnist whom you read to pick up on the contorted nature of this All Rise Act and wonder, how is something this contorted possibly, how is this supposed to make any sense? And, over the years, it was something my father taught me. If something doesn't make sense, no matter how many times you look at it, no matter how many different ways you look at it, then start following the money. And I think the columnist may be onto something with his idea on the GovGuam employees and the seemingly Byzantine nature by which one has to qualify to be part of this All Rise Act. And I was wondering if GovGuam employees could get paid to wait in line for the All Rise at the same time.
Yeah.
And whether it'd be interesting if if people who are waiting in the line, they do spot some some GovGuam workers. It'd be very interesting if they would let us know. Be curious. Would just be curious.
You mean GovGuam employees who are supposed to be on the clock at their job sites are standing in line?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting.
Just a thought, and I while I was waiting to get in is when you made the comment on the columnist who inquired about the Byzantine by design. I thought that was an astute observation. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Have a good afternoon.
Oh, it was a pleasure talking to you, Arky. So long. Okay, next we've got Senator Chris Duenas. Good afternoon, Chris.
Up a day, Your Honor, Judge Klitzkie, Honorable Marine, my favorite talk show host. I've come out of being the tailgater in listening to returning as a contributor, spankings included. But to deal with Martinez's issue before I go to the reason why I was co-sponsor of 75-36, and still I'm glad that we overrode the governor's veto. I think you, Senator Bob, as well as having to kind of navigate party issues on being a proud member and probably one of the most astute members of the GOP, understanding the party issue versus the caucus and the political issues. Really the party has rules, and the party will engage in whatever it decides to engage in, kind of similar to the St. Nicholas situation when you do pledges or whatever else when it comes to party. But in terms of the caucus, I think you kind of probably maybe remember well, Senator, caucus it's up to you. You participate or don't participate. And, each office is individual, and each individual votes the way they vote. If they choose to vote against the caucus, then they do what they do. If they vote with the caucus, they do what they do. But each individual vote on the floor is a vote that every senator has to, basically defend. And so I understand Martinez's point of view. He's a very smart individual and definitely very politically astute. But in terms of expulsion or the like, I think that's more of a party matter. And as far as the caucus, unless you disagree with me, I think the caucus is basically level that whether or not the individual senator decides to participate or not participate.
Yeah, well, I suppose that if the caucus really wanted to be aggressive, they could say that Mary Torres could no longer attend the caucus. But then if she's not attending anyhow, that's kind of a hollow remedy, isn't it?
It is a hollow remedy because I will say that as minority leader right now, there's duplicative invitations to caucus, which I issue prior to any session, during a session, and even a post session, and it is up to the individual to participate or not participate. Maybe kind of along the same lines of as caucuses you've been a part of, correct?
Mm-hmm. But during my time, there was never a time when anyone didn't come to the caucus. Never.
Well, you were fortunate. And I think that other members, and let's be clear, I think it even exists particularly even on the Democrat side at this point. I think that a lot of the bipartisan votes that you've seen, like them or hate them, is indicative right now of an 8-7 split that essentially requires a vote from other side to get certain things done. And it has to, I think each member of the legislature has to now stand and be accountable for what their vote is and what they believe, and the merit of a policy. And so at this point, I think 8-7, of course, I would rather it be Republican, being a card-carrying Republican. 8-7, and maybe hopefully we garner more than that in the future. But an 8-7 split certainly does a dynamic that involves everybody having to be accountable for their vote on every matter. More so than a overwhelming majority where a minority vote can be a minority vote just to be a minority vote. You could just be oppositional to do that. I think that you're very aware, of different discussions in terms of inter-party issues that, there's two matters at hand. Either an individual participates in a caucus or is ousted from a caucus. I will say this. All are welcome under my current leadership.
No ouster.
I have a no oust philosophy because I have no problem arguing my point of view, be it wrong or right in the end. I listen to all angles and I listen to every presentation.
Chris, you're a better man than I, because I don't know how well I could argue a position if I were wrong, because I've never had that experience.
Well, I know that, and I know that one of the key poignant positions of the master of tall tales is, everybody else has the right to be wrong.
Exactly.
I won't say I argue a wrong position, but I guess what I was trying to say is if it was deemed by the majority to be wrong, I will still claim that I'm right, but I'll respect their outcome.
So given what you're saying then, Chris, is for the rest of the 36th Guam legislature, if Mary Camacho Torres votes against the Republican position every single time, it's a Mox Nix type of deal, right?
What I'm saying, Bob, is because of the dynamics of this current minority, and I've said this to other individuals from different from governors, former governors, and others who have approached me and said, you're in a very difficult position. I was said that if I can get the majority of the minority to vote on major issues, I will consider myself successful.
I understand, Chris. I remember Ben Pangilinan in his initial days as Speaker said that being Speaker of the legislature at that time was like trying to herd cats. So I suspected being the minority leader has a similarity, correct?
It has a similarity, but I will say this, whether the perception persists or doesn't persist, this minority has been able to effectuate and I think be disruptive in a number of different ways. This minority has been able to pull at least two individuals from the majority to seek an override of Bill 11. And I can't tell you right now, I know I called it on 75, but I'm glad this is the direction. If you look, I cannot tell, my staff right now said to me, we've been in office now for 8 months, going now into our 9th month. There's been sporadic calls. There's been different, suggestions. There's been emails. My office right now is loaded with calls and emails because on Friday we're going to hear bills that have been introduced by Senator Moylan, and I'm a co-sponsor, and Senator Frank Blas Jr. that I'm a co-sponsor of, that really are kind of a microcosm of Bill 11. And everybody that's calling the office says, if we'll support these bills, but we're coming to testify because if Bill 11 were to be overridden, if you would override the governor, everything contained in these two bills already exists in the emergency powers reform that Chris Dueñas is working on. I'm glad, I'm not saying my staff wasn't busy. Otherwise, we did a lot of work on the budget. I know there are some disappointments and the like, but I can tell you why I like it. That's another conversation. Like I said, I'm making my return, spankings included. But the thing is that's how serious people are taking their offense now to the governor on two major positions. One is her complete overreach and dismissal of doctors like Dr. Wen and others who say that her policy now over a week ago was so disruptive and so arbitrary and capricious in terms of dividing our community between vaxxed and unvaxxed is so ridiculous. And you can see the results right now. It's resulted in nothing. In fact, as Ray says, 1/3 of the individuals right now hospitalized are vaccinated people. We need to have a long conversation about what it means to control community spread at this point. But villainized unvaxxed people, I can't even tell you how many emails and phone calls that I've got to return because of that situation, and it was because of Bill 11. The second now is this absolute debacle of this issue of the RISE Act that obviously was all about centralizing power, pulling it towards her, and now wanting to put her foot down on holding it to 30 million and completely dividing the community again on those who are eligible and those who aren't eligible. It is an absolute demonstration of ultimate failure of leadership to the nth degree that I just honestly have no problem saying straight away, this governor is detached from reality, detached from what the real people are experiencing, and obviously, I think, and I can pronounce at this point, operating on her own devices, because if she has people who are advising her to do what she's doing, then I would fire every single one of them.
Chris, you forgot to mention in over her head.
I rely on tall tales to do that.
So I have a suggestion for you, Chris.
I know you do. Several of them.
All right. Well, just one. They talk about minority solidarity. A couple of members of the minority, Tello and Mary Torres, were offended when Ray and I had the temerity to put together the Bob and Ray resolution, putting it in a draft form and putting their names on it because we thought it would be the kind of thing that maybe a Republican might consider. They were somewhat offended. And since that time, Bob and Ray resolution has gone nowhere. So here's my suggestion. Get Tello to go into the ladies' room there off the session hall and send her in there with some Scotch tape and a copy of the Bob and Ray resolution and have her tape it on the wall in there.
Bob, I'm gonna pose something to you. And I hope you give me, and if you can't do it now, I hope you give me a little time on 75. But, the one thing that I've been concerned about, and this is just personal to me, I have no problem introducing that resolution. And I think I've stated this unequivocally on Ray's show, and I believe on your show before, if not, definitely on Ray's show. The thing is that I want to do it in a format where everybody understands that this is a reset, because that's what Bill 11 is. I know that you completely understand and you have craftsmanship in Bill 11. And the whole construction of that is the fact that it is a true representation of co-equal branches of government coming together under a situation where you realize what you're doing and the impact in the community. Just like Dr. Wen, how he just said, I've had enough, and walked away because there was no collaboration. The idea is to make sure that when we introduce the Bob and Ray resolution, it's done as a reset so that there's not chaos on top of chaos. What it's designed to do is to say enough is enough. We have the power to stop this emergency, and what is the way forward? I just hope that you can understand me couching it in that fashion.
Yeah, I can, and I'd only have a couple of things to say. I remember this time that this boxer who wanted to fight by the Marquis de Queensberry rules jumped into the ring with an MMA fighter. It was probably the shortest bout in history because the MMA fighter just took him apart. That's right. And you are the guy who wants to follow the Marquis of Queensberry rules. Second thing I would say is this, that introducing it is not going to cause chaos or anything else. It is going to cause the governor to say, these guys are serious. And I've mentioned this on the air more than once. If you had it laying on your desks, put it in the ladies' room. Sent your whip around to the Democrats, asking them to co-sponsor. Those are the kinds of things that starts what I would call a buzz. And once you start a buzz, it becomes a lot easier to accomplish what you want to do. Remember Abraham Lincoln? Abraham Lincoln said, with public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces decisions. He makes statutes and decisions possible or impossible to be executed. So that's my thought on the Bob and Ray. If all of the Republicans signed on to co-sponsor it, well, all of the Republicans except the Democrat in wolf's clothing or however you want to say it, and then you tried to, then you moved on individual Democrats to come around, you would start a buzz and you would start turning the tide in your direction. That's my thought, Chris.
No, I understand that, and also I think probably in looking at history, you're probably and books have been written by this. I know you're an avid reader. I think a lot of things center around tipping point too, and I think that we're more than beyond the tipping point. I think that going back to Bill 75, if you just give me a few seconds on that. The everything you've laid out in terms of the historical issue of the RISE Act is completely correct. Bill 75 was introduced during the time that the RISE Act was still just the RISE Act. It wasn't all RISE Act. And I think actually the governor reacted to that. And the only thing that we were trying to do is say, let's give our people a little bit more. At that point, it was simply the individuals that have been identified in the RISE Act. And, Senator Jim Boylan and myself, Tonyana, we have never claimed that this was our bill. I mean, we were amending our Raising Lee's bill, no question about that. But it was just to say, hey, we're in the situation where we know there's an impending arrival of probably hundreds of millions of dollars. Let's help our people a little bit more. When the All Rise Act basically came to be, I think it was a reaction, because there's been plenty of reactions to economic development bills that have been introduced by Republicans that the governor has taken and plagiarized. So what I'm saying is that she was the one who threw this whole thing into a different universe, okay? Now, when the governor threw it into a different universe, she picked and chose what she wanted to use as her point of view in terms of the law that she allowed to lapse. and the All Rise program that she put in place. So when the law suited her to say that the $30 million threshold was established by the legislature, she used it. But when the law didn't suit her in saying, I'm just going to do what I want to do and give it to GovWam employees and everything else and expand this program, she just basically said, well, that's me. That's them. That's me. So
and you know what, Carl? You know what, Chris? When someone explained that to her, you know what her response was?
Off with her head.
Exactly. So that takes me back to the Marquis de Queensberry boxer and MMA fighters. But go on.
Well, I just want to say that even if the governor is deciding to once again do what she's fully empowered to do and completely ignore anything contained in 7536 with regard to giving people a little bit more money, especially since she expanded the program and was the one who created the situation whereby it would cost tens of millions of dollars more and help individuals other than what it was intended to do, then at least do the one basic thing. I will agree that Bill 7536 says one thing that I agree with, lifting the cap. Because all of this insanity out there right now and all of these people, and my heart honestly truly does hurt for individuals that are probably still in line right now or driving away after burning a full tank of gas, sitting there waiting to try to get to that line if Reverend Tax cut it down and didn't allow them to get through. All of this was caused by simply putting her foot down and saying, I refuse to move that cap. And here's another thing that's a complete insult to injury, Senator. She has issued a release today after 1 o'clock, almost bragging that there are almost 15,000 applications for this program, like it's a success.
Yeah.
15,000 applications by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Senator, says that you can damn well set your watch to it. For the balance of this week, that $30 million is not even going to come close to covering. And on top of that, by setting that situation whereby it's a 2020 return, and I don't know how many emails I have from individuals saying they're going to March 4th. I filed my tax return on March 17th. It almost seems deliberate every step of the way, or incompetence in terms of setting it up to where do everything you can to make sure I just meet that $30 million mark. And that is not a mark of a leader.
That's for sure, Chris. I only have one more pearl of wisdom to leave with you, okay?
Thank you.
She does have the ability under Wong versus Kamina to spend that federal money any way she wants. There was a statute that passed during the Reconstruction era called the Posse Comitatus Act, and it's still on the books. And it says that anybody who uses the United States Army or any part of the United States Army to enforce the civil law is guilty of a crime. Just a thought.
Good enough, sir. I've got a lot of work to do. Thank you for giving me the time.
Okay, good talking to you, Chris. We're almost we almost had to leave you behind and go to Churchill Downs, but we extended it for you. So thanks for calling.
Good enough. Thanks, Senator. Have a nice day.
Churchill Downs we go.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Sir Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and si tuos mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
So here we are, Churchill Downs in Louisville. Boy, the home stretch is going to be really short today. I think it's, 3 minutes long, Jose? Yeah, 3 minutes. The next item on my card is Therese versus the ethics process. Yeah, but I don't want to start that because I for sure wouldn't be able to finish it. But I want to recap a little bit on the governor, what she's doing, and Chris Duenas, and the Republicans, and the minority, et cetera. And Martinez's call about what he sees as the motivations of Mary Camacho Torres. But, you know, the majority doesn't change hands just as a force of nature. Usually the majority changes hands because the minority takes it away from the majority. And that's what happened at the end of the 27th. The 27th, the Republicans were the majority in the 28th, and a lot of Democrats lost their seats, and they lost their seats because of the aggressive action taken by the Republicans, and the Republicans' efforts to show the public how things would be different under a Republican administration. So if all Republicans are doing is saying these guys are bad, lose a bad governor, et cetera, that takes them part of the way. But they also have to paint the picture. If only we had a Republican administration, this is how it would go. If we had this money from Washington, we would create programs to make sure that no one who wanted to work didn't have a paycheck coming in every day. Kind of like Jose, kind of like my minimum wage for 8 hours show up. I got to find a name for that because in my FDR style program, you know, the Republicans need to be coming out with things like that. If we only had a Republican administration, this is what we would do. Not the governor screws everything up. The governor has the Midas touch in reverse. Everything she touches turns to taki.
That's our job.
Yeah. So that's my words of wisdom to any one of the Republican senators who might be listening. I got a feeling probably Chris is still hanging on the line to the very end. I got somebody else who wants to get on at the very end. Wow, I wonder who that is. Who is it, Jose? Suspense. I see the phone number.
She just wanted. There was a lady on the phone. She said she drove by Reverend Tax and just saw this older lady just standing in line on a hill waiting to get in or something like that. She just thought it was a really bad sight to see.
Well, I agree, and I thank her for making the report to Tall Tales. We're sensitive to things like that. Okay, I'm waiting for cranking up Ravel. Thank you. Okay, so that's it for Wednesday. We'll be back tomorrow. Another episode of Tall Tales. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A search for 5 missing U.S. Navy sailors. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. A rescue mission in the Pacific Ocean this morning. The Navy and Coast Guard are searching for 5 missing crew members from a Navy helicopter that crashed off the coast of San Diego yesterday afternoon.
The Navy says it was an MH-60S helicopter embarked on the USS Abraham Lincoln. It was conducting routine flight operations when it crashed at sea. That was about 60 miles off of our coast. The Coast Guard is now saying they've rescued 1 person.
Kelsey Christensen with Fox 5 San Diego. President Biden says ending the war was the right decision.
It was time to end this war. This is a new world. The terror threat has metastasized across the world, well beyond Afghanistan.
The president strongly defending the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan and calling the evacuations of Americans, in his words, an extraordinary success.
The president defiant, even after breaking this promise made less than 2 weeks ago that troops would stay until all Americans were out. Now 100 to 200 Americans and countless Afghan refugees are left behind amid a State Department warning to keep a low profile.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich. Hundreds of thousands of people in Louisiana are still struggling in the heat with no power after Hurricane Ida.
A majority of those customers are of Entergy, and that includes in the highly populated city of New Orleans and surrounding Orleans and Jefferson parishes. Entergy's officials had said it could be as long as 3 weeks to fix a number of transmission lines in the area. But on Tuesday, New Orleans City Council president says some people might have power restored today.
Fox's Eben Brown in New Orleans. America's listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the way. You never know who will drop in. Subscribe now on foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Connect to Fox News Audio and the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen.